Hi, I'm Jenna Oskey. I am an inclusion slash resource teacher for elementary ed. I'm with K1 this year. I'm mostly inclusion with a little bit of resource. And this is my fifth year teaching. I started out as a general education teacher. I originally didn't want to teach at all. And then I moved into gen ed when I decided that I really liked teaching. And after teaching gen ed for 2 years, I decided to go back and get my master's in special education. And it's been amazing ever since. This is exactly what I would want to be doing.
Hi, my name is Pam Wallen-Savich, and I am the fifth grade special ed teacher at Workload School in the Big Island. I am also an inclusion slash resource teacher, but have been in like a team teaching environment, co-teaching environment for the last 3.5 years. I am in my third year of being a licensed teacher. I did 2 years of e-hire prior to that. And I became a SPED teacher late in life. I worked in the healthcare industry for about 18 years. Never thought I would be a teacher, never wanted to be a teacher. And um, I had like a midlife career change, if you will. I decided I wanted to be a French teacher. But I hadn't been in school since I was in school, which was many years before. So I marched myself down to the elementary school and wanted to get signed up as a sub, and they put me in the preschool as an aide, and that was a special ed preschool, and that was all it took to convince me that I wanted to be a special ed teacher. It felt like home to me, and in all the years I've worked, I've never really loved my job until I became a special ed teacher, and I frankly don't see myself doing anything else. I'm very happy doing what I do, and I love going to work every day.
Hi, I'm Jessie Ford. I have been on Molokai since 2006. I've been teaching only for the past 6 years or so. I was a coach while I was working in the coffee industry, and actually the coffee fields are right next to the high school. And so I was coaching for a long time, and that was kind of my introduction into the high school. I became an emergency hire for special education. And then I went to pursue my master's for the dual certification for gen ed and SPED. And I teach English, grades 9 through 12. I'm currently in the resource setting, mostly due to COVID. We're not really doing inclusion this year, but we have been doing inclusion. So I've taught inclusion classes for the last couple of years as well, with some really awesome teachers.
Hi, I'm Megan Lint. This is my fourth year teaching. I teach seventh grade special education at Evan Mackay Middle School. I've actually only been here for a year and a half. I moved in 2019 to teach here. My prior experience was in a preschool setting. And I actually didn't go to school to be a teacher at first. I wanted to be a veterinarian. Can't even say it now. I wanted to be a veterinarian for marine mammals, and really struggled in college. And my advisor, John, asked me what I wanted to do. And I was a kid. And I was like, I want to be a teacher, but I don't want to be a teacher. And he was like, take a class. Why not? And so I took a class. And after my first class for teaching, that's all I wanted to do. And I started doing special education 2 years ago when I finished my master's, so that I could come in and have all of the knowledge of teaching my students and how to best support them in the classroom.
Question from me, I'm Lena Alakialoha, special inclusion, it's a Friday, inclusion math at Kauai High School. I'm currently teaching freshmen. I also have 2 resource classes for geometry. I've got 3 years of teaching under my belt, but 8 years in the DOE, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm here because I love my kids and I want them to see how much, I want them to shine the way I see them shining at me. So like the previous SPEDucator said, I love my job, we love our job, and it's the kids that keep us here, honestly.
My name is Sean Woodward. I am a special education math teacher at Frankton High School. I've been in both regular education and special education, 7 years in regular education math, and then 15 in special education. Um, I've been in the DOE since 1999, so this is my 22nd year in teaching. And I became a special education teacher just because I wanted to make a difference in some young person's life. Uh, when I was in high school, my parents moved to the mainland, just looking for a better life and better opportunity. And so I became a boarder at Comemel, and really appreciated guys like Mr. Farm, who was like a dad to me and made a big difference in my life. And so I wanted to make a big difference in someone's life. And an opportunity opened up in 1999 with the RISE program to get into it. But if I had my pictures in front of you, it basically were some of the pictures that I enjoy with my class. In my math class, we try to do fun, interactive, collaborative group projects. We call them quad D projects. And I had some pictures of my students doing some of their math videos. You can see it on YouTube on their Gov's Math Lab. It's our YouTube channel. And um, I believe it's so important to just have opportunities for students to work together. So I had some of those things and some of the other cool experiences that I had as a teacher. But yeah.
My name is Nikki Yankowski. I've been teaching for 20 years, which is crazy to think that it all started at a Special Olympics event, and my high school coach encouraged me to go into special education. I've taught 14 years at the elementary level, resource, inclusion, and then 3 years at the high school level, co-teaching inclusion, and then now I'm at Eva Mackay Middle School, where I'm teaching inclusion and resource. So to 7th graders.
I'll go. Just because it's pretty recent, and it's nice to be able to share it before I forget, because the grind is real. Like you were saying, Russell, it's the grind, man. Memorable moment. So it's been a crazy year with COVID, and our students kind of dropped off the face of the earth. There's no doubt about that. It's been a struggle to just get them to come to school and do their work. And third quarter was one of those quarters where my kids fell off the face of the earth. And I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? One, I'm a failure. I did terrible. But I pulled them in for 2 days straight on A blocks when they don't normally come to school. And I was like, sorry guys, you're coming to school. You're gonna spend 6 hours with me for 2 days. Sorry, but you gotta come in and we gotta get this work done. You're gonna learn some math and we're gonna kill it. We're gonna squash it, and you guys are gonna be passing for third quarter. So they were all upset. But long story short, it was just a really nice population, just us, little tight knit group for 2 days. And by the end of it, they were like, Miss, why don't we do this more often? We should do this all the time. And I was like, yes, but no, like you were here because you didn't do so hot. Like, but then the comment that, why don't we do this more often? And it was math, straight up math, solving for special right triangles, if any of y'all know anything about that. And then another comment was, this doesn't even feel like school, miss. Why can't we do this all the time? And that was just one of those beautiful moments for me where I was like, oh my gosh, and this is why I do what I do. Because it was just that moment where like they felt so check, they felt on it, they were confident, and they wanted to do what they were doing. And it was school. So even more so, I was like, what? Listen to you guys. But yeah, super memorable moment, especially in all of this COVIDness. So thanks for asking that question.
I'd like to share a memorable moment. As a teacher, there's so many to choose from, but these past 2 years, I've been working with a really phenomenal young woman at our school. Um, I have a senior that's been with me since her sophomore year, and in elementary, she was diagnosed with a number of disabilities: dyslexia, dysgraphia, double vision, and she was really struggling throughout elementary, middle school, and high school. And I met her as a sophomore, and she was just phenomenal. She worked so hard, and I had to give her things to do to keep her engaged because she worked twice as hard as everybody. So I started having her tutor one of the students in my class that had autism. And then her junior year, I asked if she could come back from the come back to my class and teach and coach. She kind of became like a co-teacher for me in my period 2 and my period 4. So she was a part of the teachers academy at school. And so instead of sending her out to the elementaries, they let her come to my class. And she originally wanted to be a counselor, but as she worked with my freshmen last year, I gave her about 9 freshmen to tutor, and I don't want to spend 10 minutes talking about all the amazing things she did. But you know, as this year came around, she told me, you know, Mr. Weir, I think I want to be a special education teacher. And so it's really special to me that that a girl that was once at the 1% reading comprehension level and was at the bottom of her class, you know, in you know, English in elementary, to want to come back and go to UH next year and become a special education teacher herself. Um, it's a really special thing, because when I retire, in some ways, I feel like my legacy is gonna be passed on in the DOE through her.
And I'm gonna just add from an elementary standpoint, back when I was teaching elementary in Minnesota, I had a lunch bunch group where kids with special needs and their general ed peers would come to my classroom, and we'd work on specific social skills with the kids. And a turning point for me was when the general ed kids are like, Miss, can I come with you? I mean, it was like the cool thing to do. It wasn't a negative to come to my room and work on social skills. It was a positive thing. And the students I worked with were seen in a positive way. They were seen for their strengths. And I know I've shared this before about one of my students who was an amazing artist, and the kids saw that. And so that was definitely a turning point. And I also want to say with Lena, similar situation where the kids are with COVID right now, they're like, Miss J, the day that I get to spend with you goes so fast. And I'm like, yes, that is why I do this, you know. And when they're engaged and they love it and they're like, I got it, it's pretty awesome.
In my classroom, we're all about building mindfulness for my students to advocate for when they need breaks. And I'm a go type teacher in my classroom. Like, I know we all are. I feel like a chicken with no head running around my classroom, bouncing between my 9 students. And the other day, one of my students, I was sitting at my desk and I just must have looked really frustrated or stressed out or something. And he goes, listen, do you need a brain break? Because, you know, you can take a brain break. This is a safe place for you to take a brain break. And this is a kid who, like, it was so sweet, the fact that he asked me, because I'm constantly telling them to advocate for when they need a break, and for him to come up and be like, it's okay to take a break if you need a break. I was like, oh, thank goodness. But it's so sweet to see that, because they haven't been on campus for very long, and because of COVID. So to see that just those little bits of time that I'm spending with them and how much of a difference it's making for them to notice when they need a break, and then to also then recognize when other people might need a break, has been so important. So it was so nice and super memorable that a student who we have such a relationship built that he noticed when I needed a break as well. And he was like, it is okay. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. So building that relationship and that empathy with my students, and then getting to see that, has been very memorable for me.
I wanted to address this as like in a collaboration sense with a teacher that I worked with last year for an inclusion class. We had an inclusion freshman class that was only 4 gen ed students and like 12 special education students, and most of them were like SLD, but then there was some like extremely low readers, and then like some really extreme behaviors on top of it. And it started off like crazy, and the teacher I was working with was my mentor teacher, and she's like very organized, and you know, like I can't ever like be as good as her. You know, she's taught me a lot, but she was very flexible because I really wanted to do Socratic seminar with this group. And we had to do a little bit of reconfiguration. There was a couple kids that couldn't quite handle the inclusion setting, but we were also really concerned about making sure it was a good place for the gen ed students to be, because some of them were really high end students. So it was the spectrum that I don't think could be matched for any time. And we worked very hard. I know we had mentioned in the previous group about debriefing like every day, and we had like extensive debriefing to be like, what just happened? And so we developed a really good structure and worked with the kids. And then first Socratic seminars were very rough. We had to do a lot of structure for that. But then the memorable moments were when the students really started to own the discussion in the Socratic seminar. And then we had some really amazing reflective writing afterwards. And some of the students that like really struggled with reading and writing were finding themselves able to be in a leadership position in the Socratic seminar. And it took like about half of the school year to get there. But it was incredible. It was so much work, but yeah, it was really awesome.
So right now, working at the 7th grade level inclusion, I'm actually working mainly with kids with specific learning disabilities in the area of reading and math, some students with other health disabilities, but that's primarily where my students' disabilities land. I mean, I've worked with kids with autism, emotional behavior disorders, developmental cognitive disabilities, but that's where I'm at right now.
I'm the same way at my high school, but I wanted to add to that, like, I think as a special education teacher, you just got to be ready for anything, you know. And so last year, I remember it was the first time I had a student that came from another country. I had this one boy from China, and that was kind of interesting. You know, he came from China. He couldn't speak English. I couldn't speak Chinese, and you know, he was autistic, and so teaching him geometry, that was whoa.
Very similar to Nikki. I'm at the 5th grade level. Most of my students this year have specific learning disabilities in math and reading, but you never know what their disability is going to be until you meet them at the beginning of the year. And so last year was the first time I had a student with a hearing impairment, and I have taught students with autism and other health disabilities. So yeah, like Sean said, you just have to be ready for anything. And yeah, so that's where I'm at this year.
Very similar on my end. I've worked with students of all different types of disabilities and needs, but being young with the younger students, being with K1, there's a lot of students that tend to qualify under developmental delay because we're still learning about the student. They're still so young, and some of them come in and are even just adjusting to school. They're learning how to be in school, what to do. So a lot of times we will start with that developmental delay. And like, for example, I was just part of a meeting where a student could have qualified under 2 different categories. And we decided to go with developmental delay because the student is so young and is new to the school. We're coming back after COVID. And we just explained to the parents that this isn't going to have to stay this way. If we see next year that the student falls under this category more than this other one, we can change it. It's always flexible. We can make adjustments as needed. But that's what I see with a lot of the younger grades.
I'm also very similar. I have a lot of students with SLD. I had a student last year who had behavior and emotional disturbance that I worked with. But yeah, you got to be super ready to jump in with whatever they have and then support them the best that you can.
Similar,
Go ahead.
specific learning disability, some with like high behavior needs, a couple with intellectual disabilities, and one with cerebral palsy, stuff like that. Not too many severe disabilities in my work line.
So mine will be fast because I'm just echoing what everyone else says, even across my 3 years, all inclusion, majority of the disability has been a specific learning disability, ADHD, emotional disability, couple of autism, nothing super severe. Unless you, well, no, yeah, mostly SLD, same thing, high school. And it's actually more uncommon to see students with a specific learning disability in only math. It's usually specific learning disability, reading, writing, and math, which makes total sense when you think about it. But I would definitely say that's majority of it. This year I do have one with a hearing impairment, so then you end up in touch with the high itinerant teacher. But it's, yeah, I mean, most of the kids in inclusion, they're pretty high functioning, so I think that's why we see them more so in inclusion.
I think another important point is we have a lot of students with disabilities on paper, but in reality, we have a lot of students that have amazing abilities, and that's our challenge as teachers to find out what those gifts, talents, and abilities are, and you know, try to maximize it and try to learn from them too, because there's so many of them that have such amazing talents.
I'll jump in real fast. Mine's very different. It just depends on the day. So our seventh grade rotate A/B days, but on the off day, I have my whole caseload on campus with me all day. So that schedule, depending on the class and depending on the day, it can range from covering social studies to science, math, English. Today we gardened for a little bit just to provide enrichment activities. And then I also build in time for IEP goals and objectives. But it just depends on what day it is and what class period is, and if I'm in math or if I'm in English or if I'm in resource or if I'm in my own room on an off day.
Very well said. Anyone else want to add to that? If not, I know it varies. So
I was gonna say,
I was going to say it just depends on your students, how many classrooms you have, how many minutes they receive. I've had it last year. I was in one classroom the whole day with my students. One year I had 6 different classrooms and you had to schedule where you're going to be each part of the day. It kind of, and then if you have to pull some, if you go pushed in for some of those minutes, it just looks so different depending on school, teacher schedules, student minutes, all those things.
I was gonna just jump in. During COVID, I had a period 1 where I had a study skills, but now that's changed. But now period 2, I had English. Period 3, I had resource English. Period 4 was math inclusion. Period 5 was math inclusion, and then period 6 was ELA inclusion. And then on top of that, we have an advisory with general ed and special ed students for an hour each day. And then on the off day, like Miss Lint said, I have all my kids on my caseload on that day. And honestly, it's one of my favorite days because, oh my gosh, we can finish up schoolwork, we can work on IEP goals and objectives, and then we can do some fun enrichment types of activities that include academics, but in a fun way.
I want to say, and this sort of answers one of the questions in the chat, to not be afraid to advocate for the time that you need with your student. At the beginning of the school year, at my school, I don't know if every school does this, but you know, the grade level kind of get together and figure out the schedule, because at 5th grade, we have resources to factor into, like PE, library, Hawaiian studies, etc. And so sometimes the schedule gets really big and your windows of opportunity may not seem so obvious. So don't be afraid to go to your gen ed teachers and say, like, I need to have these kids for this time or this time. And sometimes, you know, you're in the classroom with the gen ed teacher, like I have been for language arts and math and then pulling them into a small group in the class. And sometimes you're pulling out. So like I last year and this year have worked with two different gen ed teachers. So I have to kind of mitigate between their schedules, like when am I going to push in for math and reading with one teacher or pull out. So it's really important to communicate your needs and the needs of your students for those minutes with your gen ed counterparts. And you know, it can switch up from maybe quarter to quarter sometimes, depending on your caseload. And, you know, you have IEPs throughout the whole year and their goals may change. So their minutes may change and their needs may change. And so just be, I guess, unafraid to state your needs, but know that there may be some flexing throughout the year too. If you're in like an inclusion co-teaching type of environment like I have been in.
I'll just jump in with organization skills, teaching the students how to organize their planner, organize their binder, and then also self-advocacy skills, how to advocate for their needs, like teaching them how to write an email, a proper email to their teacher, or even just social skills in how you communicate.
Absolutely, Nikki, you're like hitting the nail on the head. I do that with my kids all the time. We know that we have the HA framework to depend on. That's that if you need some place to start as far as those non-academic skills, start at the HA framework, but also just, you know, look around your classroom and be like, what is it that I feel these kids need? Just based on your interactions, just read them and be like, do most of my kids need to work on their simple manners? I'm not sure if it's just that social media realm where they just get used to not verbally responding to people. But I noticed that I work a lot on those things in the classroom, just that simple like, yes, no, thank you, yes, please, or just responding like, would you like a piece of paper? And if they don't respond. So that's what I work on a lot, is just those like basic manners and skills that they are going to have to use when they get out of high school or are applying for a job, making eye contact when they're talking to people, definitely the organization, but huge one, which is what Nikki mentioned, and that's self-advocacy, because our special education students come to us and many of them do not have the confidence to do so. They feel defeated. They feel like whatever they think or say or want to share is wrong. And so we've got to help provide that environment for them that tells them it's okay for you to grow here. And we know that you're not. We know that nobody here is perfect and we can all grow and we can all learn from each other. So it's okay. That self-advocacy piece is huge.
I agree with both ladies. I teach a lot of social emotional learning in my classroom, identifying things that stress us out. How do we deal with coping with that? A lot of my students have a lot. We all have a lot of stress, right? And students are the exact same way, and their stress that they endure throughout the year, on top of COVID and all the other things that they're going through. Puberty at 7th grade, whew. But all of those things, like trying to get them through that and giving them coping mechanisms that are healthy, and being able to talk about who is available if they have questions or they need help, and just making sure that they feel positive about themselves and their ability. I focus a lot on the ability, not the disability, because we all have special abilities that make us all great as people. And that's why we're all here together. So a lot of just focusing on them as a person, not just as a student, but as the whole person.
I think in my class, one of the most important non-academic skill that I try to teach my students is leadership. I think we need more leadership in the Department of Education. I think we need more leadership in our schools and among our students. And so, I try to teach my students that you don't have to only lead down the chain of command. You can lead up the chain of command too, just by your example. And so I try to teach my students, the Army core values, for example, because I think it's so important. I mean, I want to see you guys be loyal, to school and each other, to, fulfill your duty, to be respectful, to have selfless service to each other, to, you know, um, just demonstrate the things that they'll need in life. Because again, I believe that their leadership skills will take them a lot farther than their academic skills.
In my classroom, I actually don't have a lot of things on the wall. I have found that I have a few students who get very overwhelmed when the classroom is overly decorated. And so I want to make sure that the students who come into my classroom feel very calm. I had a student autism last year. He really struggled with things on the wall. So I try to keep that to a minimum. I also allow all of my students to have their own cubbies. So I went and bought like the 3 shelf cubbies for middle schoolers so they could put all of their things in there, which looks very different from my co-teachers' classrooms. And I allow them to keep a lot more of their materials there so that if they're losing something, they know where they can find it as a home base. So a lot of it is broken down for them to have a space.
Can I just jump in as well? Everything I have has a purpose. So we have like a vocab wall that has vocabulary words, not just in my classroom, but from like social studies, science, ELA, calendar, choice sport. Everything has a purpose, not a whole lot of clutter.
We use flexible seating in our room, so you're going to see wobble stools and folding chairs that they can use on the floor itself, standing tables if they need to stand up and work. So kind of like a little bit of a non-traditional furniture situation.
Can you explain how you and the general ed teacher work and balance the workload?
I can just jump in. Usually for math or ELA, the first time that the lesson is presented, usually the general ed teacher takes the lead, so I can see what she's looking for, what skills she wants to focus on. And then usually the second period, I will honestly take over, or we'll do more co-teaching together. So it really looks more like you wouldn't know who's the teacher, general ed teacher, and who's a special ed teacher. So we do a lot of that.
We have something similar between me as a special education teacher, the gen ed teacher, our EA who stays in that classroom. The students know that they can go anywhere at any time, ask any adult for help, get support in any way. And it's really amazing how much it flows, because some students, sometimes my students, my special ed students, will absolutely rock a lesson and finish everything. And I'm actually helping a lot of the gen ed students by providing some of the accommodations that normally I would be providing for our special ed students. So by working that closely and meeting with your gen ed teacher and planning things, and even especially your EAs are absolutely amazing. It makes the room just flow really nicely. And just like Nicole said, that they don't really know who is which teacher in the room. They just know they have supports. They can go to those supports and get any help that they need.
Very similar as well. This year looks a little different because of pandemic compared to last year. Last year, my math co-teacher and I, we pretty much, there were times when I would teach an entire lesson and he would do the accommodations and the fulfilling that for me, so our students didn't know. This year it's a little different. My co-teacher for math, he does a lot more of the lessons, and since we were online, I was the one who was like on the Go Guardian chat messaging all students like, hey, what's your answer for this? Making sure that they all knew, so that when we got into the classroom, they realized that he still taught the lesson, but I am there to support all students. Actually, one of my favorite questions was, why are you in my English and my math class? And then sometimes you jump into my social studies class by a gen ed student. And I was like, because I know everything, which I feel like we all do. But I said, I'm there to offer differentiation for all students, no matter where they are. So if we all struggle with this one math problem, I want to be there to support you. And my job is to also support your teachers. And so I just have this magical degree that allows me to do all of the things. And she took it and she's like, oh, makes sense.
And I also want to say they're a general ed teacher or general ed student first before they're a special ed student.
The basic gist of that is making sure you and your teacher make time to plan. So find that time at the beginning of the year, mid-quarter, end of quarter, mid-quarter of every quarter, at the end of every class. Plan and talk about as much as you can, collaborate as much as you can, because if you can build that foundation where you're on the same page, when you're in that class together, you're not feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm winging it, I'm just listening to what she's saying and I'm just kind of going with it. No, like if you have that strong foundation of planning, then when you're teaching in that class, it's like you guys are kind of more on the same page. And of course you're discussing, like I don't hesitate to be like, okay, so what do you want to do now? Like, and just ask and communicate and just go with the flow as far as how you feel like the lesson is being delivered. And that in itself just creates this overall balance between the teachers. And when the gen ed teacher knows that you are on board and you want to plan with them and you make it a point to be like, hey, what are you planning to teach? Because I need to know this ahead of time. I can't just walk in and be winging it like this. No. Then they see, okay, I've got to get my stuff together and be planning. And then consequently, they communicate with you more. And then there's that balance as well. The workload is even, it's even sort of, it's distributed in the way that it should be, is what I'm saying. But build that foundation for communication and make it a point to tell your teachers, like, I need to plan with you. It's a must. That's all.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, I see one more question in the chat. Can you please share any interview tips, questions to help a graduating K through 6 TC student prepare?
If you're
And there's
in
about, sorry, real quick, just about 4 more minutes and then we're gonna have to wrap up, so.
So if inclusion is what you really feel is your forte or where you want to be, when you're interviewing, I would ask the admin team to tell you, what does their inclusion model look like? And what is their, I asked this question recently going through interviews, how do they train their EAs and what does that process look like? Some schools do it better than others. So yeah, I would just, think of the questions that you might have as a SPED teacher about, the team and ask those to the admins.
And I would add too, they're probably going to ask you about like your problem solving skills. How are you going to handle a problem with a student, a colleague, maybe a parent? How are you going to handle those skills? As well as, I think it's important to know your due process, those pieces of it as well. As well as, why did you go into the profession? Why are you becoming a special ed teacher? And also know about the school that you're going to be going to or interviewing with.
I had the weirdest question and they asked me what book I was reading. And I was like, so that was like, it was one of those that just kind of throws you off. So after that, I always had one book that I knew I was reading that was pedagogical in nature, so that when they asked me, I was like, oh yeah, I am reading this book by this author and I think it's interesting or whatever it is. But it was the most random question. So sometimes they'll do that. So be prepared.
And I was going to add also, like, what other things might you be interested in our school? Like maybe you want to participate as a coach for the basketball team or the track team, or those types of things? How else can you take your skills that you have and contribute to our school community?
Don't
Don't
be
be
afraid to troll them on Facebook and look at their websites either. I did that, and they were really impressed to know that I knew about their school and kind of had done my homework. So I think, they will expect to hear that. So don't think it's weird if you go Facebook stalking them.
And know your philosophy of know your philosophy about teaching.
And don't be afraid to take time to process your answers. I was always the type of person where they'd ask me and I try to answer right away and it'd come out completely wrong. So it's okay to take your time and really say, well, let me think about that for a second. I want to make sure I give you the best answer that will represent me.
And just be yourself. Let your personality come out. If you're excited, you're excited. Do it. Let them know that that's you.
And how are you going to work with team members? What's your team working abilities?
We did get our 1 minute mark. So any final tips that the SPEDucators want to share before we go back to having everybody in this room?
Rapport. Communicate with your parents, get to know your kids, learn from them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, SPEDucators, for your knowledge. I'm sure the participants and even myself learned a lot. So I'm going to end our session and we can just kind of chill here until everyone returns.